Welcome to this explainer. Today we're talking about aquatic insects, and let me tell you, these little guys are masters of some of the most mind-blowing evolutionary engineering on the planet. If you've ever looked at a tiny bug just thriving in a pond for months at a time and wondered about the biological technology keeping it alive beneath the surface, well, you are absolutely in for a treat.
So here's the core problem. How exactly do they breathe down there when they don't have lungs? You see, aquatic insects have closed respiratory systems. That means their normal breathing pores are completely sealed off. To survive, they literally have to rely on highly specialized integumentary structures. We're talking bizarre gills and microscopic hairs, just to pull oxygen directly from the water. It is a biological engineering marvel for sure.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to go on a fast-paced tour of nature's wildest scuba tech. First, the underwater breathing problem. 2, traditional gills, abdominal and caudal. 3, internal oddities, specifically rectal gills. 4, physical gills and snorkels. And 5, the plastron, permanent scuba.
All right, Section 1, the underwater breathing problem.
So how does nature actually solve this? Well, the solution's broadly split into 2 distinct engineering paths. On the anatomical side, we have physical extensions of the insect's body, things like abdominal, caudal, and rectal gills that developed independently across different groups of insects just to extract oxygen right out of the water. But then on the physical side, we have these amazing air-based devices. Instead of extracting oxygen through organic tissue, adaptations like physical gills, plastrons, and siphons literally manipulate atmospheric air. They create miniature dive tanks right there underwater.
Moving on to Section 2, traditional gills, abdominal, and caudal. Now, the most common anatomical gill is the abdominal gill. These are lateral outgrowths, rich with trachea, built to absorb oxygen. But what's truly wild is where these things pop up. Sure, they appear on the first 7 abdominal segments, but insects like Ephemeroptera and Plecocoptera nymphs have secondarily developed copious tufts of filamentous and foliate gills on their necks, their thoraxes, the bases of their legs, their coxa, even the submentum under their mouthparts. Nature literally just finds a way wherever there's spare real estate on the body.
Then, moving to the back of the insect, we have caudal gills. Most Cygotopter nymphs, for example, rely super heavily on these structures. They usually feature a medial gill and 2 lateral gills called cerci. And these aren't just, simple tail extensions. They are highly tracheidated triqueateral structures. Their entire internal cavity is absolutely packed with a dense, complex tracheolar system, nerves, blood channels, and alveolar tissue. Depending on the exact species, they might look like swollen, saccoid appendages or flattened lamellate tails, perfectly adapted to maximize surface area for respiration.
Which brings us to Section 3, internal oddities, rectal gills.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that it sounds like absolute science fiction. Dragonfly nymphs, along with some Diptera larvae, have literally evolved to breathe through their rectums. No joke. The anterior 2/3 of the rectum is modified into this barrel-like chamber. Inside, the rectal wall features 6 thick epithelia split into basal thick pads called rectal pads and distal gill filaments. Water gets drawn into this barrel chamber, and oxygen is absorbed through pads densely packed with tracheoles connecting to the main longitudinal tracheal trunks. It's essentially a highly sophisticated internal water pump that's just masquerading as a digestive tract.
And if we zoom in to a microscopic level, those gill leaflets inside the rectal chamber come in 2 main structural varieties. First, you have the simplex, or simple gills, which are your basic undulating or papillate structures. But then you have the duplex, or double gills, and these are incredibly intricate. They can be elongated like filaments, foliate like little leaves, or lamellate like flat overlapping plates. It really shows just how much evolutionary effort has gone into maximizing oxygen absorption in such a tiny confined space.
Before we completely leave anatomical gills behind, let's quickly break down 2 minor types, spirochelar and blood gills. Spirochelar gills are long filament-like processes attached directly to the spiracles, and they're used by aquatic beetles and flies like the Tipulidae family. Blood gills, on the other hand, well, that's a bit of a misnomer. These are tubular, irreversible structures found on the extremities of certain bugs, like Trichocoptera larvae. And biologists actually believe they're used way more for osmoregulation, so balancing water and salt, than for actual respiration.
All right, moving right along to Section 4, physical gills and snorkels.
So, to really understand physical gills, you have to understand one specific word, hydrofuge. It basically means shedding or being impervious to water. Certain aquatic insects are completely covered in highly concentrated hydrofuge hairs, and these hairs are the biological linchpin here.
They allow the bugs to trap and store air for inspiration, effectively creating this external lung made of bubbles that can store air for a remarkably long time. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer physics of how they pull this off. It happens in 3 microscopic steps for bugs like Nauternecta and Diatiscus. Step 1. As the insect touches the water surface, a fringe of hydrofuge hairs spreads outwards, utilizing surface tension to connect their internal airspace directly with the atmosphere. Step 2. When they start withdrawing from the water, the hairs become hydrophil, welcoming the air right in. But step 3 is the real magic trick. Upon diving and immersing in the water, the orientation of the polar molecules within the hairs actually reverses. They become hydrofuge again, violently shedding the water and securely trapping a bubble of atmospheric air right against their spiracles. It's genius. But besides trapping bubbles with hairs, some insects have evolved specialized built-in snorkeling gear to reach that atmospheric air. I mean, look at these wild adaptations. The Nepa bug features a long terminal respiratory tube. The Hydrophilus beetle actually uses modified hairy antennae to break the surface tension. Aristolis larvae possess extendable respiratory siphons, and Culicid larvae have their spiracles located right at the apex of a siphon. And the Dytiscus beetle, it carries a massive air tank beneath its wing covers, known as a sud-electra film of air. They are quite literally bringing their own scuba tanks to the dive.
And that brings us to our final, most advanced evolutionary trait. Section 5. The plastron, permanent scuba.
So, the crucial point is this. A normal physical gill bubble slowly shrinks as the insect breathes and the nitrogen dissolves into the water. But a plastron? A plastron is a very thin, permanent layer of gas held by specialized hydrofuge hairs. The gas volume is negligible, but the air-water interface is held in place by surface forces so strongly that the volume remains completely constant. Water simply cannot replace the air film. Functionally, it resembles a permanent tracheal gill, communicating directly with the spiracles for continuous gaseous exchange from the dissolved oxygen right out of the water.
So who are the masters of this permanent scuba suit? Well, beetles like Haemonia, Coxelmus, and Elmus have these long hydrofuge hairs distributed all over their body surface, with the tips actually bent over to lock that thin film of air right in place. The Phytobeast beetle takes it a step further with hairs on overlapping flattened scales, creating a highly efficient plastron. Because of this incredible technology, an insect like Elmus becomes completely independent of atmospheric air. It can live for months entirely below the water surface as long as the water is well aerated. They literally never have to surface to breathe. We've seen bugs that breathe through rectal barrels, craft reverse polarizing hair bubbles, and wear permanent biological scuba suits. It really leaves you wondering, as we look to explore the deepest, most inaccessible parts of our own oceans, how might these millions of years old biological designs inspire modern human engineering? I mean, if a tiny beetle can construct a permanent, self-sustaining air-water interface on its back using nanoscale hairs, what could human material science achieve by mimicking the plastron? It is a fascinating thought to leave you with today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity diving deep.